Hello and welcome to Firstpost Spotlight, where we bring you stories that matter to you from all across the world. From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, we shed light on issues that shape our world. I'm Alison Lagrange, live from Durban, South Africa. Let's begin with the top headlines. India's gross domestic product, or GDP, grows by 7.4% in the January to March quarter, as the world's fourth biggest economy beats growth trajectory estimates. Iran denies Austrian intelligence report, which claims Tehran is seeking atomic weapons despite ongoing negotiations with the US, says its nuclear program is aimed for civilian purposes alone. China pledges cooperation with Russia to counter terrorism as the two countries repeat their commitment to safeguard each other's core interests. This as Beijing's top security official wraps up his Moscow visit. France's President Emmanuel Macron signs key bilateral agreements with Singapore, including on nuclear energy cooperation, as the two countries upgrade ties to strategic partnership. And torrential rains and flooding kills at least 36 people and washes away several homes in central Nigeria. Rescuers continue to search for missing people. Hello and welcome. We begin with the latest from the Indian subcontinent. Bangladesh's ousted Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has voiced strong condemnation of a troubling trend of increasing extremism under interim leader Muhammad Yunus. Hasina also flagged a troubling trend of unchallenged judicial leniency toward individuals convicted of war crimes during her tenure. In a virtual message, the Awami League leader warned that the country is turning into a haven for terrorists. Hasina said, under Yunus, war criminals are being freed, and those who fought for Bangladesh's independence from West Pakistan's rule in 1971 are being persecuted. Hasina's comment on the release of supposed war criminals came after the Supreme Court released Jamaat-e-Islami leader Azharul Islam. Earlier this week, the hardline extremist was sentenced to death in 2014 by an international crimes tribunal on charges of genocide, murder and rape during 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War. While Sheikh Hasina's remarks underscore the fears of rising extremism, her rival Khaleda Zia paints a slightly different picture. The Bangladesh Nationalist Party, or the BNP leader, who returned to Dhaka earlier this month, delivered a message focused on the decline of democracy in Bangladesh. The BNP leader did not mention the rising extremism under Yunus's watch, but was quick to add that Bangladesh's democracy and sovereignty are under threat. The ailing BNP leader, whose party's top leaders remain in exile, hoped that Bangladesh will soon witness the restoration of democracy. Khaleda Zia's call for restoration of democracy in Bangladesh comes as the interim leader, Muhammad Yunus, continues to extend the deadline for the national election to June of 2026. The proposed schedule is opposed by most Bangladeshi political parties, including the BNP, who call for elections by or before December of this year. Now, earlier this week, Yunus bluntly blamed Bangladeshi politicians for being impatient. Yunus suggested the elections can only happen after lengthy reforms are completed, a process that has shown little progress under his watch. When Yunus took power in August of 2024, he promised sweeping reforms in electoral law, women's rights, and public administration. But 10 months later, what has emerged instead is a resurgence of hardline Islamist influence in a country that is officially secular. Furthermore, the release of once convicted war criminals has also raised alarms. Now, the political crisis in Bangladesh is deepening, with ousted former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina sounding the alarm on extremism and opposition leaders on the streets for democracy's survival. With hardline forces gaining ground, the road ahead toward democracy looks uncertain. And moving on now, let's turn our attention to India's other neighbour, Nepal. Now, just like Bangladesh, the domestic crisis in Nepal is worsening. The calls to bring back monarchy in the Himalayan nation are growing stronger with each passing day. Thousands of pro-monarchy protesters took to the streets in Nepal's Kathmandu today. The capital saw widespread pro-monarchy protests yesterday as well. Now, Nepali royalists have marched through the capital demanding the reinstatement of the former king Gyanendra Shah and the re-establishment of Hinduism as the state religion. The pro-monarchy demonstrators chanted slogans expressing their deep affection for the former monarch and their desire to see him return as the head of state. Listen in.
We are going to continue our protests until the centuries-old monarchy is brought back and the country is turned into a Hindu stage for the interest of the country.
Now, the Royalist rally comes a day after the Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli's Communist Party of Nepal unified Marxist-Leninist held marches to mark the Himalayan nation's Republic Day. Yesterday's rallies held by the pro-monarchy protesters and the supporters of Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli raised concerns about potential clashes between the two groups, prompting a significant police presence. Hundreds of riot police were deployed to keep the pro-monarchy protesters and the supporters of the Prime Minister apart. Nepal abolished its centuries-old monarchy in 2008. The country then transformed into a republic with a president as the head of state. This was followed by bloody street protests in 2006 that forced the then King Gyanendra Shah to give up his authoritarian rule. Following this, the former king left the royal palace along with his family and went on to live as a commoner. Now, this resurgence of pro-monarchy sentiment follows earlier unrest, including a protest in late March where violence erupted, resulting in the deaths of 2 people, and the arrest of several demonstrators who still remain in custody. In recent months, the calls for the reinstatement of Gyanendra Shah and the return of Hinduism as the state religion have grown louder. Royalist groups argue that the current political parties are plagued by corruption and have failed to govern effectively, leading to widespread public frustration. The Royalists say that their protests will continue until the monarchy is restored. The former King Gyanendra Shah has not yet commented on the recent demonstrations. However, despite growing support, experts have suggested that the former king has little chance of immediately returning to power. Now, 17 years after the abolishment of monarchy, the Himalayan nation continues to grapple with political instability. And we will continue to monitor the situation in Nepal and bring you the latest updates as they unfold. And shifting our focus now to Trump's immigration crackdown that has fueled anxiety among international students who aspire to pursue their education in the United States. Following Trump administration's latest move to halt new student visa appointments across the world, other countries are trying to lure scores of anxious US-bound students by fast-tracking the admission process, with France being one of them. French business schools are fast-tracking or extending application deadlines for foreign students potentially affected by the Trump administration's tougher stance on visas. The Grenoble School of Management has publicly encouraged students facing uncertainty in the US to consider France. The French business school has taken the proactive step of fast-tracking applications specifically for students already admitted to US business schools. Now, joining this effort is the ESCP business school in Paris. The ESCP is considering pushing back application deadlines, typically in May, to accommodate students who are unable to attend US universities due to the Trump administration's stringent visa policies. Now, these moves are part of a broader campaign by the Trump administration targeting US universities, including research funding cuts and criticism of academic freedom. While Washington's approach has drawn criticism from the French academic community, this situation has also spurred a wider European effort to capitalize on a potential brain drain from the United States. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has proposed a substantial financial package to attract researchers to Europe. French President Emmanuel Macron has pledged significant national incentives, and the UK has also floated a similar scheme. While French institutions are actively adapting their admission processes, universities in other countries are also monitoring the situation closely. Experts suggest that Germany and Ireland are also emerging as particularly attractive alternatives for foreign students in Europe. In Asia, Japan also aims to ramp up its number of foreign students to 400,000 over the next decade. Trump's crackdown comes at a critical period in international student application process, as many young people prepare to travel to the US in August to find accommodation and to settle in before the term starts. Experts suggest that the reputational risk and the ensuing brain drain can be even more damaging for US institutions than the administration's new vetting guidelines take shape. The international student community will be closely watching to see how these alternative pathways unfold. And finally, shifting our focus to the Philippines, less than 2 weeks after President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. suffered setbacks in the midterm elections, the Filipino leader has executed a major shakeup in his administration. Days after President Marcos asked all of his secretaries to resign, the president has now begun to announce the new appointments. Among the most significant changes, Marcos has appointed Police Major General Nicholas Torre as the new head of the Philippine National Police. Major General Torre will now lead the 232,000-strong National Police Force. His promotion comes just months after he led the high-profile arrest of former President Rodrigo Duterte on an Interpol warrant issued by the International Criminal Court. Following Torre's persistence to execute the Interpol warrant, Duterte was finally sent to detention in The Hague, where he is currently awaiting trial for alleged crimes against humanity over his controversial war on drugs. When Marcos' administration's executive secretary was asked whether Torre's promotion was a reward for arresting Duterte, the official said, and I quote, "Let us assume that this was given on merit." The president also replaced the Philippines Solicitor General, who earlier refused to defend Marcos' administration's stance that Duterte's arrest by the ICC on Filipino land was legal. Justice Secretary Jesus Crispin Remulla, who supported Duterte's arrest and publicly took full responsibility for the operation, was retained in his position. Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro Jr., who is among the most vocal critics of Chinese belligerence in the Indo-Pacific, also survived the midterm overhaul of Marcos' cabinet. With sweeping cabinet changes and the appointment of a new police chief, tensions between the Marcos and Duterte camps have grown, even as the president has publicly called for a reconciliation. Sara Duterte, the former president's daughter, remains vice president, and despite her father's legal troubles, The recent midterm election results show that the family continues to enjoy strong electoral support. The shake-up is widely seen as President Marcos's attempt to counter the enduring popularity of the Dutertes, following the disappointing performance of his own allies in the Senate elections. A key police promotion and a cabinet reset signal a political shift by Marcos amid changing political winds. The battle for control in the Philippines' power structure is fast evolving. And that's all we have on the show for today. We will see you again next week. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to Firstpost.
From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, shedding light on the world's top headlines, detailed analysis on the stories that matter the most to you. Catch it all on Spotlight at 6 p.m. India time and 12:30 GMT, only on Firstpost.
Hello and a very warm welcome. I am Gasheen Garland and you're watching Firstpost. In the next few minutes, I get you the top 40 updates from around the world, only here on Fast and Factual. Let's get started. We start with the US, where a federal appeals court has temporarily reinstated President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs. This comes a day after a US trade court had blocked the tariffs, ruling that Trump had exceeded his authority in imposing them. The White House criticized the ruling, saying America cannot function when diplomatic or trade negotiations are railroaded by activist judges. The White House has announced that Israel has approved a new ceasefire proposal for Gaza. However, talks with Hamas are still ongoing. According to reports, Hamas has rejected the proposal, calling it a continuation of violence and starvation in Gaza. Hamas has alleged that the deal fails to meet their key demand, which includes a complete halt to the war. Now to West Asia, Yemen-based Houthis have claimed a missile attack on Israel's Ben Gurion airport. Authorities said that the attack forced Israelis to flee and halted air traffic. Meanwhile, the Israeli military said it intercepted a missile launched from Yemen. The Houthi attack came a day after Israeli strike on Sana'a airport. Now moving to updates from war in Europe. A Russian drone attack in Sumy killed one and injured another. The attack also triggered a massive fire. This as the Russian forces have pushed over the border into northeast Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Russia has targeted 50,000 troops near Sumy region. Moscow has called for the Russia-India-China trilateral. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said it's time to revive Troika as India and China have reached an understanding on the border situation. He also accused NATO of trying to lure India into anti-China intrigues, calling it a large provocation. The BRIC Troika has been frozen since the 2020 Galwan Valley clashes. In South Asia, Indian Home Minister Amit Shah visited Jammu and Kashmir's Pooch district today.